Our next guest is our go-to guy in Golden Hill and the owner of Lepe Tendwell Properties. Please welcome back to the show, Voltaire Lepe.
There he is. Voltaire's in the house.
Hi there.
What's up, man?
Nothing much.
So today, this is interesting because today we're talking about tips for landlords, right? So we talk about real estate all the time, but this is tips for landlords. You do property management as well at Lepe Tendwell.
Yes.
And you've got a report that you're going to give out for free. 10 tips?
10 tips to manage your property and increase the value.
And increase the value.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that sticks out to me because I think most people assume, if I'm going to turn a house into a rental, that it's going to get dilapidated, it's going to be devalued by the tenants. But you've got tips to help prevent that. Yeah,
I mean, the last 14 years I've seen a lot of properties. I've met a lot of property owners, and one thing that I see a lot of is property owners not being able to maintain or appreciate their property as far as the value, just because they're not managing the property correctly, and it takes a lot of years, a lot of experience in trying to figure that stuff out.
Yeah, definitely does. So we'll give as many tips as we can today in the short time that we have, and then if anyone wants the free report, we'll have the information on the screen so that they can get that.
Yeah, for sure.
So first one, obviously tenants. The tenant, I guess how you select them. What about the tenants do people need to know?
Yeah, so the biggest part, the biggest part about property management is the tenant selection. Okay, if you could get this down pat, if you could get it right the first time, then your life's going to be a lot easier. Your property is going to maintain and increase in value in the future. So, a couple things. Like, for example, you probably shouldn't rent to people that you know. Okay, you probably shouldn't rent to...
Should not rent to people you know.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't rent to like family or friends, because if you think of it, for example, if you rent it out to your cousin, and your cousin misses a payment or is late all the time, I mean, are you really going to go to your cousin and serve them a 3-day notice, right? Or a buddy of yours? Are you going to risk that relationship? Because at the end of the day, most property owners, they don't own the property free and clear. Right, and that's a misconception that a lot of tenants have. Oh man, he's rich, he owns the property, and he's making all kinds of money off me, and I'm only late a few days. But as property owners, we have bills to pay too, right? So at the end of the day, are you going to risk you being late on your mortgage just because somebody that you don't want to give them that notice? The other thing too is you should probably have some criteria that you base your tenant selection on. A certain FICO score, a certain income level, maybe 3 times gross rent, and no eviction history. So you should probably have a criteria. That way, when you get applications, it's easier just to shift and sort through the applications and just push them out the way, and then just get to the people that you want to, place in your property.
I think what happens to some people is that, not in this market. 'Cause in this market, if you put an ad out there, you're getting a lot of people.
Right.
But in a lot of markets, some they'll stick an ad out. Here's, I want to rent my place, and it's a week and nobody calls, and then all of a sudden they get a call and they're like, oh gosh, I hope this is the guy, right? Because I have to make that payment. I want him to make it for me.
Right.
And so they start to look through with those we call it beer goggles. That's what a guy calls it. You look at it, you start seeing this application, and you go, oh, that's okay, I believe him.
Right.
Oh, he's got a bad credit score. That's okay, I believe him. That's not his.
Right.
And you just want to get the lease signed.
Exactly.
So you got to be careful of that.
Yeah, and the other issue with the tenant selection process is if you choose the wrong tenant, and they know who you are, they know you're the owner, you start to hear sob stories. Oh, this happened, my car broke down, or whatever sob story it is for that month, and then you start, feeling bad for them, and it's really hard to make a business decision and the best decision for yourself and your family, and say, hey, look, sorry about your bad luck or whatever, but here's a notice. You have 3 days to pay rent or to get out.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, you got to be comfortable doing that with whoever you select.
Exactly.
No question. What about the rent? What advice do you have for people in that regard?
One thing that you need to track and always have a pulse on is the rental market. Okay, you always want to know what the area is renting for. The Union Tribune came out with an article a couple weeks ago that said that the average rent per unit increased about $150 a month.
Over the year?
Over the year.
Wow.
Right? So from last year to this year, $150 increase. Now, most landlords, most property owners don't know that. And the ones that do, they're probably not going to raise the rent on the tenants, right? But at the end of the day, you're doing a disservice as far as like the value of the property and the future of the property, because when you go to refinance in the future, guess what the value is going to, come back at. If the rent isn't at market value, it's probably going to come a little bit less. Or if someone comes to purchase your property, and let's say you have multi-units, like a little apartment building or something, and they're not up to rent a market rents, then the next buyer is going to pay you less for that property. So you're really doing yourself a disservice, your future self a disservice. At the same time, some landlords, they strike deals with tenants. They say, hey, look I'm cutting you a deal on the rent, so just don't call me and bother me with anything, right? I mean, I see it all the time.
Yeah, so if you have a garbage disposal issue, don't call me. We're giving you this lower rent. But there's some other risks to that too, right?
Right, exactly. Because if you have side deals with the tenants where, I've ran into landlords where they say, oh, you know what, I have great tenants, they never call me for anything, and I ask them about the rent, and they say, well, I haven't increased it in 10 years just because, I have a really good thing, I don't have to worry about it, and they manage the place themselves. What we come to find out is that the property has a lot of maintenance issues, right? It's not in the best shape. And the other thing about side deals is the tenant can never waive their right to a habitable unit, to a safe unit, to a clean unit. So if there's mold issues and there's different maintenance issues, I mean, really it's the manager who happens to be the landlord, it's their responsibility to take care of it. No matter what side deals you have, the tenant can never waive, those type of rights that they have. So for example, if you get a call from a tenant and they say, hey, look, we have mold growing, it's the landlord's responsibility to take care of it right away, and then later they could determine whether it was a tenant's fault, and then they could send them the bill for that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're the landlord, don't say, oh, that's your fault.
Right.
Because they are liable for that.
Exactly.
Potential damage.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll leave you with the rent is make those increases, as you see fit. Check the market rent at least once a year.
Voltaire, one of the tips, because I've got a sneak peek at this.
Right.
Of course, everyone, you can get your free copy of this top 10 tips just by following the information on the screen. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about was the month-to-month leases versus term leases. You have a tip in there about that. Can you give us a sneak peek on that one?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of property owners, a lot of managers, they prefer long-term leases, 12-month or 2-year lease. And whenever I meet with property owners, they say, hey, look, I prefer this 1-year or 2-year type of agreement with the tenants because I'm guaranteed the rent. Now, from my experience and the way that I see things, I prefer, as a property manager, I prefer getting everybody on a month-to-month rent. And the reason is because on a long-term lease, on any type of lease, the tenant has more rights than you, the property owner. Right? So, for example, if you rent it for a 1 year to a tenant and then right off the bat they're late on the rent all the time, you start seeing red flags because you drive by and they have all kinds of stuff in the front lawn and the property isn't looking as good, and they start calling for different things and just kind of they're a nuisance to you, right?
A PETA?
A PETA.
Yeah. Pain in the ass.
Yeah. So let's say they're that. If you're on a lease with them, you can't get them out. The only way you could get them out is if they stop paying you rent. But other than that, you just have to live with it for the rest of the year, the rest of the 2-year remaining, whatever's remaining on the lease, as opposed to a month to month. If you start seeing red flags right away, you could just give them a 30-day notice and go find yourself another tenant.
Wow, well, that's already a bunch of great stuff. That's only a few of the top 10 tips. So make sure you reach out with the information on the screen to get your free copy of the top 10 tips for landlords to help keep their property value increased, which is a difficult thing to do for most people. Voltaire, thank you so much for your time and for all the stuff that you do for the show.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Stick around for more Smarter San Diego TV, where we guarantee to make you smarter than everyone else, commercial free.